You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and work experts. We talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at, what they do every day, and what they see coming next for the future of work. Hope you enjoy. Happy Wednesday. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
Doing great.
Busy week. It feels like it's been nonstop for us over here at Modern People Leader. But great to have you, Bryan.
Thanks for having me.
And so I know you've listened to the show and you're familiar with good news stories. It's the way that we start every episode. Each of us shares a personal or work-related story from the last couple of weeks. And we like for our guests to go first. So if you have something, please kick us off.
Yeah, I mean, the easy thing would be like the tariff whiplash that's going on. But I think the thing that's actually, I think a lot of people are talking about here at Nextdoor, and I've chatted with some of my peers, is the email that the CEO of Shopify, Toby, sent out earlier this week to his company. I guess it was an internal memo that got leaked, so he just posted it to Twitter. I saw it on LinkedIn News, and it's really kind of how they're thinking internally about raising the intensity on incorporating AI into everything we do. And like I said, conversations I've had with lots of people in similar roles to mine, we've all been thinking and talking about it. And I think that note just kind of caught everyone's attention because it's the nature of conversation about how we work right now.
Steven, you want to go next?
Yeah, I am going to go I'm going to go personal, kind of 180 degree from Bryan's. And that is, I have 10 spots for my bachelor weekend. So I'm getting married in July. This is my second marriage. So I didn't think it made sense to have like a huge bachelor party or anything like that. And so I'm doing a bachelor weekend at a ranch in Mexico, close to the border. And at 48, like, your friends have kids and lives and everything's so complicated. So there was a moment where I was like, oh my God, this may not happen because everyone is saying no. And the good news is I've got at least 5 strong for the weekend. Daniel, of course, is going to be a part of that. But super exciting. And the real good news here is I'm even getting that much closer to the wedding, which is going to be in Costa Rica. We're super excited about. So no major updates there, but bachelor weekend is moving forward. That's my good news.
I'm excited. I hope people don't get tired of me talking about the baby coming, but like, it's the only good news that I can think of. There's always like something Lena related. And so this past weekend we had the baby shower and it was great. Exceeded all of my expectations, had a ton of people there. And so we got a ton of gifts and we hadn't opened any of them until yesterday. And so yesterday we almost finished the setup of the nursery. And so we have the bassinet, we have the glider that I dragged up the stairs a couple days ago, and we unpacked all of the presents and they're in their appropriate spots and it feels like we're ready. I think a couple of months ago, more so my wife, she was nervous that we didn't have anything set up yet. And now I feel like we're prepared. So that's my good news.
That's great. Well, listen, it's a rite of passage to becoming a parent that you start to talk about your kids all the time. And parents understand, and people who don't have kids will just add you to the list of all they do is they talk about their kids all the time. So welcome to the club.
Thank you. So we keep coming back to the Annie Dean episode, and that's for a reason. Atlassian has mastered the art of running a distributed team, and Annie shared something that really stuck from their internal data. Daily office visits don't drive team connection, but 3 to 5 days of intentional togetherness, that does. They found that bringing teams together a few times a year led to a 37% increase in team connection, and that boost lasted about 4 or 5 months. So just let that sink in. It's not constant office time. It's not more Zooms. It's just one well-planned offsite every few months. That in-person time really matters. Not daily, but deliberate. Retreats, offsites, onsites, sales kickoffs. These are the moments that fuel culture, creativity, and collaboration. The problem that we see? corporate group travel is extremely painful to plan, and it's one of the biggest line items on your budget. And so that's where Marco comes in. They make corporate group stay as easy as booking a personal hotel room. Think Airbnb, but for groups of up to 500 people. One, they're going to negotiate on your behalf, so you'll get 20 to 30% cheaper prices on hotels. Two, the properties are handpicked for corporate group travel, so you're going to have the right mix of meeting spaces, communal areas, on-site dining options, and other group-focused amenities. Lastly, their AI-powered search makes it really easy for you to find that perfect hotel based on group size, city, vibe, whatever it is that you're looking for. And honestly, when Suman, Marco's co-founder, walked us through how it works, we were blown away by how simple it is to book group travel with them. Something that's been historically very manual and kind of complex. So if you're planning your next team offsite, leadership retreat, or full company gathering, I highly recommend you go check out Marco. There are no contracts, no signups, and it's 100% free. Go check them out at mpl.marcoexperiences.com. That's mpl.marcoexperiences.com.
Well, I'll keep us moving. And so, Bryan, we were just talking about the fact that you came up in a personal conversation I was having with another HR leader. And so she shared a little bit about your background just as we were chit-chatting. And so I'm super intrigued by the next segment, which I call this a Brene Brown question. Like, what's your story, Bryan? Like, what did your journey look like meandering through HR and the business world? How did you become the head of people at Nextdoor?
Yeah, I think I told you guys I turned 50 yesterday, so I'm gonna try to do the abbreviated version.
No, don't do that.
I'm about to update my LinkedIn to say almost 30 years of experience, which is like
it's a badge of
hurdle.
Honor.
And for those who turn 50, I'm sure they would say the same thing. 50 is a birthday that kind of demands contemplation. Some birthdays you're like, hey, another trip around the sun, let's get back on it. But 50 is like, no, you got to pause and reflect. So I'm definitely in that state of mind. So anyway, I grew up outside of Boston. Most of my childhood was there. Concord, Massachusetts is my hometown. And then I went to school in the Southeast at Vanderbilt, which is in Tennessee. I went there. I didn't know anybody, had a great time, made a lot of lifelong friends. And when I graduated, I took a job as a recruiter for a large staffing company called Aerotech. It's like one of the largest private recruiting companies in the world. It just kind of happened that the Nashville office where, I kind of started right where I graduated in college was a really strong office at Aerotech. And I worked there for 2 years as a recruiter. And what happened is the early mentor of mine who was running the Nashville office, because it was such a successful team, had been elevated to run a whole function. And so he asked me to move to San Francisco at the end of 1998, early 1999, because everyone was quitting the recruiting company to go to work for .coms. So I was like a company guy, took the move package to San Francisco. 6 months later, quit and went to work for a .com. It's hard to explain now, over 25 years later, that like it was just this vortex for talent. There were so many startups in 1998, 1999, and 2000 during the .com era. It's just wild. I was really grateful to kind of get that exposure. That was really my first introduction to the tech industry. So what happened when everything kind of came crashing down in 2001, I was working for a company called startups.com. I really wish I still had that business card. It's just perfect. And I met with a woman, her name's Valerie Fredrickson, who was running an HR consulting and executive search practice. And we had partnered together, and I just went to her looking for advice. And she asked me to join her company and lead the executive search team there in 2001. And I was 24 or 25. I really just needed a job because these .coms were just imploding left and right. And I just wanted to be able to pay my rent. So I took the job, and like first week, she's like, okay, let's get out there and get these executive searches. And I remember saying, like, Valerie, there's no executive searches. Like the .com bubble has just crashed. There's no one's hiring. There's no recruiting going on. And what I discovered is she actually started her company in the mid 90s as an outplacement firm, which is of course kind of services you provide as a third party to companies that have to conduct reductions in force and layoffs, services to help people find their next thing. And she was like, yeah, but no one's kind of buying this stuff. And I was like, well, I think we should dust off the playbook, because 2001, 2002, there was tons of layoffs. So anyway, that's how we kind of navigated the crash. So we worked together for 5 years. Again, she was an incredible mentor to me. But in the mid 2000s, I went through what many people in consulting and executive search run into at some point, which is I kind of want to be a part of the same place versus work with a portfolio of companies. So I really wanted to pick a company that was growing and be a part of like a growing, I wasn't sure if I want to work in tech or biotech. So the two companies I was really interested in at the time, again, for people who are interested in early 21st century history now, they were Google and Genentech, right, which are two kind of darling Bay Area companies at the time. And I joined Google. They had just gone public a few months earlier. They were about 3,000 employees, which is, again, difficult to orient against the size and scope of Google today. It's just such a gigantic organization. But at the time, it was scaling really quickly. And it was really, even though it had gone public, it very much was this idea of like a Bay Area tech startup. And Google in the early years was a really special place. So I was primarily in recruiting leadership roles there. I was there for just under 8 years. I led recruiting for product management. I led recruiting for software engineering in the Americas. I led recruiting for sales. My last job there, I actually moved to their New York City office in Chelsea Market. And I've basically been in the Bay Area since 1999, except for those 2 years I lived in New York, my last 2 years at Google. So anyway, that time Google grew from 3,000 to 80,000 people. You know, it was really kind of incredible scaling exercise, which was kind of what it's a little bit of be careful what you wish for thing, but it was a really unique experience for me. And in 2010-ish, I had an internal opportunity that I was considering, but it was kind of like, hey, if I take this job, I'm probably going to be here for more than 10 years. Nothing wrong with being at Google for a really long time, I can tell you that. But I was kind of like, well, if you're going to do something, what's it going to be? And at that time, the beginning of the 2010s was an incredibly fertile time for startups. So this was coming out of like the great financial crisis. So at this time, these were startups of like 100 to 150 people. Uber, Airbnb, Square, Dropbox, Pinterest. These were like 100 people or less. You think about how big and important these companies are today. They were just starting. They were a year, 2 years old. And so I was interested in coming back to California. I was dating my now wife, New York to California. And so anyway, I ended up taking a role with Square when it was about 150 people, startup. And that first year leaving Google to go to a startup was really challenging. It was like early startup days at any company is like really difficult. But I learned a tremendous amount. I was there for just about 3 years. We grew from 100 people to about 1,600. And then Square went public a few months after I left. And the reason I left was I was being recruited by Marissa Mayer, who I knew from Google. She was the CEO of Yahoo at the time. In my first recruiting job at Google, I partnered very closely with her as we were building out the product management organization there. And so she recruited me to be the head of HR at Yahoo, which was just a completely different type of challenge I'd ever faced with. It was a turnaround. At that point, I'd mostly experienced growth. So the idea of a turnaround I thought was really interesting from a people leader perspective, just a different set of obstacles that's different from scaling like at all costs, right? And it was big. It was a big company. It was 15,000 employees globally. It was a public company. It was just a lot of things I'd never seen before. So I was really grateful for that opportunity. It only lasted 2 years because not too long after I joined, maybe a year after I joined, the company was broken up and the core business was sold to Verizon. And so most of my second year there was really about managing the sale of the company and its integration into Verizon, which takes a long time. So anyway, after Yahoo, I took some time off. I'd never really taken any time off. So I took some time off after Yahoo, which is funny. I got severance because the company was acquired. And I realized, I think the reason a lot of people don't take time off in the US, as messed up as this is like because of healthcare. You're just worried your healthcare is going to drop. And I had like some extended runway with healthcare from the severance package. So I took probably more time off than I would have, except for that one thing. And relatively speaking, it's not super expensive. It's just this scary idea that if you lose your healthcare, you're in trouble, which is a really valid concern for so many people in this country. But anyway, I had some extra time, so I took some time off. And during that time, I really reflected on my career. I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. And I tried on all sorts of new pathways. I actually made myself try on, hey, maybe you're done with tech. Maybe you're done with the people space. Maybe you should open a pizza place in Tahoe. Maybe you should like live in London. Like all this nuts, these really wild ideas, which I was really grateful for, because most of the time you're thinking about that, like when you're having a bad day at work, but you can't really spend much time on it. I really explored these ideas. And then towards the end of my time off, I just decided, no, I really like working with tech companies. I like this people domain. And so I set about to my next thing. And what it ultimately led me to was I was talking to a couple companies, but Sarah Fryer, who I knew really well from Square, she was the CFO when I was leading the people team. So we were both on the same executive team. She was announced as the new CEO of Nextdoor. And so I joined with her in 2018. And we were brought in at the time, the founder CEO, Nirav Tolia, was moving up to the board, and they were bringing Sarah in as an established operator to kind of take the company to the next level. So we went through a lot 2018 to really last year. The company was it was also a turnaround, which is why I thought it was interesting. You don't usually get startups and turnarounds at the same time. Startups usually go under, but this was a 150 person startup that was going to be turned around by the incoming CEO. So we raised money. COVID actually had a really positive impact on Nextdoor's business as a product to, simplify it. Like everyone in the world cared about their neighborhood at the beginning of the pandemic, which is kind of not normally that the entire world thinks about their neighborhood at the same time. We took the company public. And then what happened in 2023, like many companies, was a very, very difficult market. We had some challenges in our business. We did a big reduction in force in November of 2023, 25% of the company. And then about, after a 5-year run, what happened was Sarah made the decision, like she actually stepped aside as the CEO. She's now the CFO of OpenAI. And what was interesting at the beginning of last year is Nirav, the founder, came back to be CEO again. So the last 15 months have been really fascinating because we've had a founder return to lead the company that he started while being not gone. He was on the board, but not really running the company. At a time we became public, we grew from 150 people to 500, at one point 800. So the last year's really been about this like new, we call it the third era at Nextdoor. There was like the founding era, then there's a second era, which I joined. And now we're in this third era. We're really trying to capture the magic of the early years with the scale that we added in the second era to figure out what's next. So that brings me to today. And here I am on this podcast telling that story.
I love that story. And we're going to talk about that third era here in a second.
Yeah.
Before we do that, I feel like most people, at least in the US, maybe outside of the US too, have heard of Nextdoor or use Nextdoor. I know during COVID, my wife was obsessively in Nextdoor checking updates, and I feel like she's actually still in there pretty regularly. But I guess I'm curious, like, how does Nextdoor make money? Is it through ads? Like, what is the business model?
I mean, I think there's a huge opportunity with the local marketplace, right? If you think about a small business as one of your neighbors, they want to participate not necessarily with the people that the owner of the small business knows, like who they went to college with. They want to participate with the people in their local area. So particularly businesses where you walk into the business, like a restaurant or a retail store, Nextdoor's opportunity to let them connect to their neighborhood is fundamentally different. Because if you think about the network you join when you join Nextdoor, it comes from your address. It doesn't come from who you know. And so this connects you to a lot of people you don't know that you share a location with, your neighborhood. And if you compare it to all the other networks you have on your phone, like that, those are grounded in either things you share an interest in, or somehow you know this person, you used to work with them, or your friends. So Nextdoor's it just makes sense that it's a place where you're connected really to the people you share this space with. And there's inherent trust in it. Like the example I like to use is, you can pick your neighborhood, but you can't really pick your neighbors. But you could live next door to someone with a completely different belief system than you, totally different worldview. And if you thought you left the garage door open and you were a mile away, you could call them and they would go check for you, because you would do it for them. That reciprocity about sharing the same space is really fundamental. And that's kind of the most important foundational aspect of why we think Nextdoor is really, really big opportunity.
So interesting. Daniel and I are super fascinated by all the businesses and people leaders that we've had on the show. And I'm curious, maybe I have some recency bias because of what's going on in the world. And literally, we were on a call right before this call where tariffs were mentioned. You mentioned tariffs earlier, so I'm just curious, like, does the tariff environment impact? How do you guys see it impacting your business? Does it have an impact?
Yeah, for sure. Because a lot of our business comes from advertising, and so if you look at different categories of advertisers, say like Home Depot. Home Depot is a big customer of ours because they want to be able to tell people near their local Home Depot there's sale or just come shop at Home Depot. They don't know what's going to happen with the cost of the goods they sell. So that can impact their advertising spend. So the different types of industries, which is so many, impacted by cost uncertainty, is definitely going to flow through to their spend. And advertising is typically a flexible spending amount. So that's where you curtail it first. And so we're certainly navigating the uncertainty. We'll see how it all plays out, right? But people are certainly like, no one really knows what's going to happen. That makes you take a more cautious stance.
That's so interesting. I mean, that you're echoing what we heard on the call right before this recording, and their feedback was like, we could see in our sales metrics, and our customers are HR tech companies that are trying to sell to HR leaders. And so they were like, yeah, we could see in our metrics, like as soon as the tariffs were announced, a huge drop off in our lead metrics. And it's just, I'm not sure everyone totally understands what these tariffs mean. I'm old. I'm 48. So and I was an economics major. So I happen to know a lot about tariffs and the implications of tariffs, but even then it's crazy to see that like the immediate impact that these tariffs are having on our clients and on your business. So super fascinating, but let's keep it moving. I want to talk about, Daniel mentioned earlier that we were going to get back to the errors that you walked us through earlier at Nextdoor. You said that there, I think, are 3 distinct errors when you look at Nextdoor's existence. With your co-founders returning, that kind of has brought you to the 3rd error. And so walk us through what culturally, organizationally, HR wise, what have these different errors look like, and what has it meant? What have been the implications been for you as a people leader there?
Yeah, so we use it just to try to, make sense of our 14-year history. Every day is different, every year is different, but this kind of simple buckets of the 3 eras just kind of helps us organize our thinking. The first year is really the founding era. It was from the beginning of the company, really in 2011, the 3 co-founders getting together and kind of settling on Nextdoor as an idea, really up until 2018 when that leadership change took place. And the first era was about creating the product, bringing the original vision to a working product that people downloaded and used. And it worked, millions, tens of millions of people were using it. It was a real thing. I think the charter for the second era when I joined was really about, a lot of the priorities was around the kind of the company infrastructure. And that's everything from a robust monetization strategy to adding core functions like finance, people, legal, IT. The era 1 was really very, very scrappy, to the point where they had really resisted on adding a lot of these other functions, which I think a lot of startups can be too scrappy. Not necessarily, that was kind of where Nextdoor was, but you hear a lot about companies that hire too quickly, but you can also not add enough depth to these other pieces of the puzzle. Also kind of fundraising, having a good strategy around that. All this type of stuff is what the second era really looked like, building up a depth in product development, expanding globally. Those are the types of things that I really think 2018 to 2023. When I joined, I had a clear point of view, but then COVID just changed everything. Work from home, disruption, the way we all work every day. We went through all that during era 2 as well. And so when Nirav first came back, I think the first real risk, because Nirav, and he would say this, he'd never really run a company of more than 150 people before. And so now we were over 500. He'd never run a public company. We're a public company. So he had to have real learning velocity on how to do that. But we also had to make sure he didn't just try to make it a 100-person startup again, because that's what he kind of left, 150 people. And so we had to kind of both bring back a lot of the original founder energy from the early days while not losing the benefits of the operational capabilities we had built up in the second era. That was really kind of the early test to try to navigate. That's actually how we ended up with era 3, because we didn't want to seesaw between which way is better, the early days or the second era. We had to kind of form a new vision of what the best of both worlds would look like.
And a lot of times I find that your employees want to gravitate and attach themselves to to old eras, and then you have like an us versus them mentality. Daniel, we were just talking about this, I think, on a recent podcast, that these eras, you think like everyone will quickly align and focus on kind of the objectives of the current era, but you have to be really intentional about that, to your point.
Yeah, I think the founders speak with a unique voice. Like I forget who said this one time, but like it's like there's no such thing as an ex-founder. I'm ex-Google, ex-Square. There's no ex-founder. You're always the founder, right? And they could just speak with like this moral authority about what the company, what it means to exist, which is a huge benefit of having founders participate. But it's also why I think the being really clear on your mission, values, like making those the statements that everyone has to rally around, can insulate you from what you're talking about, Steven, which is people kind of going, back in my day, it was much better. Or no, you all were terrible in the early day. Like we fixed that. Like that's really toxic. Right. And so when you can come up with these shared statements of what your identity is, which is what mission and values are, that I think is a better path forward.
Were there any other common pitfalls that you were trying to avoid with this founder return? Because I'm just thinking of situations where I've been at a company and the founder has left, and now you have this new regime, and usually it's a rocky transition, and there are some people that are really happy and they're like, finally, this is what we needed. And there are other people that are like, what the hell? Everything has changed overnight. And so I've never seen it play out to where it's been 2 or 3 years later and the founders then coming back. But I could see that being like exciting, but also kind of disruptive. So I'm just curious, like what were some of the pitfalls that you were trying to avoid with that return? We've had a lot of chief people officers come onto the show, and if there's one thing that they have in common, it's that they run their org their way. I think of people like Crystal Boyson at Sprout Social, who completely rethought performance reviews for her company, ditched long form questions, created 3 clear ratings, which they then can auto calculate into a final rating. I think of Carmel Galvin from Klaviyo, who ditched the generic way of measuring quality of hire and built a custom framework tailored to each team. I think of Jessica Zwaan, who tracks LTV to ECAC to evaluate every single manager. Like, these are the exact kinds of people leaders who wish they had a tool like ChartHop. And for those of you who aren't familiar with ChartHop, ChartHop is a flexible people ops platform and HRIS that brings in all of your people and business data into one place. So think, HRIS plus having the ability to bring in data from places like Salesforce. And they let you customize key processes like headcount planning, compensation, performance, and engagement exactly the way that you want it. No rigid templates, no one-size-fits-all playbook, just the flexibility to build the systems that you truly believe in. With ChartHop, you can really run your org your way. If their platform sounds like something that you want to learn more about, I highly recommend that you go request a demo. Just go to charthop.com and make sure to let them know that we sent you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little different because our founder was on the board. So he didn't totally disappear. He knew kind of what we've been doing, at least on a quarterly basis. So I think that meant strategically, he had a good sense of what the challenges and opportunities were. For us, what it was in the day-to-day operations, because we were working on a very different cadence than he personally was used to. He had kind of become a professional investor and board member, wasn't really in the day-to-day grind. So he had to kind of get back into fighting shape really quickly. But also it was set up in a way that he didn't set up, and he's running the company. So he's got to almost sit in someone else's seat and figure out what's new that he's going to keep and be patient before you have to both move quickly, but also not moved so fast that you're doing like knee-jerk reactions. It's not what I'm used to, so let's get rid of it. And so what we were really trying to help with was just trying to increase the pace of learning for all these different things at the same time. So we tried to set up just different checkpoints on like, hey, you literally shouldn't do anything your first 2 weeks, but like just watch. No matter what you think, you got to just see this stuff spin around a few times. So we were really intentional about, and then, but also, hey, this is the time you're going to make these, whatever big changes, whatever's on that list. And there was a bunch. This is when we're going to do it. And we're going to tell everyone this is what we're doing now. We're making these changes. And in the early days, I think what worked pretty well for us was he did a lot of listening. And so when we made a bunch of operational changes, it wasn't nuts. It was just kind of changing the cadence of certain meetings, getting rid of some, adding some others. He was able to really ground it in the observations he'd heard from employees. And I don't think it shifted too much of what he was going to do, but because he could really use the language back of what employees had shared with him, it makes more sense. It kind of changes it from someone just came in and waved a magic wand to, I heard you and this is why we're going to do it. So it made landing those changes much easier.
I've heard you mention the phrase founder energy and founder's mentality a couple of times in this conversation now. And so I'm just curious, is this like a founder mode play? Like what's going on here? Like, it seems like there's definitely intentionality in the words you're choosing. So I'm just curious, like, does this at all relate to founder mode?
It's serendipitous, but it's not the same thing. So one thing I give Nirav a lot of credit for is when he was gearing up to come back. So this was, January, February of last year. And for those of us who witnessed kind of founder mode spill out into Silicon Valley Twitter, that was really last summer. So a few months before this, when Nirav was getting ready to come back, he had this great insight. He's like, someone must have looked at this before. Founders have come back before. Like, what can I learn? Again, he hadn't totally come back, but it was imminent. And he came across this author, a consultant named James Allen, wrote this book called The Founder's Mentality. Mm. And what he and his firm had done was studied thousands of companies. It really tied to business performance. And they had isolated like the 8% of businesses that just really show long-term success that are founder-led, or founder preserved, like the founders on the board and closely involved. What were the consistent themes? And so he put forward this, he wrote this book. It's this great framework called the Founder's Mentality Framework. And so Nirav, again, people underestimate this move. He just sent him a cold email on LinkedIn. He didn't know him, didn't have any connections to him. Just said, hey, I'm a founder. I'm taking the helm at my company again. I wonder if you'd be willing to talk to us. Your book's great. But you guys ever send a cold email on LinkedIn? You're like, no chance anything comes back, right? So anyway, they made this great connection. And so he's actually, James Allen, Jimmy, has actually been great with the leadership team here and has really helped us think about how to apply some of the learnings. And so like the book is worth getting, but I'll kind of go, there's 3 kind of core principles that underneath each of them has different ways of thinking about how to operationalize these. There's this idea of insurgency, which gets to the importance of having like a really bold mission and a big horizon for what you're doing. So most of my career, I've tried to work for companies with a big mission, something that's simple and can speak a lot. And he identifies founders kind of have this innate, they started a company over an idea. So how can they channel that back into this? The second one is called this frontline obsession, which I found to be really useful when you look at operational decisions. A lot of times when companies scale and make mistakes, it's because they've gotten too far away from their customers or their users. Like the stories and the data and information has to travel too far to get the decision makers. So the frontline obsession is about going straight to the people who are hands-on keyboard with the buyers and users of your product. And then the third one is the owner's mindset. So I think it's a little more straightforward. I mean, like half of every tech startup has act like an owner as a company value. We're one of them. But what I found useful, because that's a value that just gets abused. What I mean by that is people throw it around to just justify any type of behavior. He's really clear. He really sharpens it where it means having a strong focus on cash, having an aversion to bureaucracy, and having a bias to action. And I find those are better crystallized definitions of what act like an owner means. Because again, I've worked with a lot of founders want everyone to think like they're a founder or an owner, but it just gets kind of tossed around to say you're not doing what I want you to do. And I found these definitions really helpful. So anyway, this framework really helped us put a lens on everything we're doing and how to really sequence and prioritize how we're going to think about everything from culture to operations with this goal in mind of like how do you get the energy back from being a small early stage startup when you're an older public company that's working at a bigger level of scale. It's been really, really helpful. And what was interesting, Steve, to your question is like, we're a few months into this work when founder mode kind of spills out and everybody's talking about it, right? And what was really visceral for me is like, I couldn't really get a good explanation of like what anybody meant, except for like, it when you see it, at least in the early iteration. And I think that I've never spoken to Bryan, but I think he spent more time on kind of fleshing out what he meant by that. But early on, it was just a lot of tweets like, I'm in founder mode, I'm in founder mode, I'm in founder mode. And I was like, what? Any founder that's tweeting they're in founder mode every day is not really in founder mode. They're just tweeting it out.
I feel like for him, from what I've read and what I've listened to, it was the frontline obsession that he felt like they had lost or that the founders had gotten too far removed from. And so I'm curious for Nextdoor, if you had to, I guess, grade yourselves on insurgency, frontline obsession, and owner's mindset, was there one that you guys felt was lacking compared to the others and that you've been putting a lot of effort into? Or like, how did y'all think about that?
They were all really helpful. I would say, me personally, the frontline obsession was really clarifying for me. So when Nirav joined, and we're not that big, 500 people is not that big, but it's bigger than a garage size startup. One thing Nirav did that I thought was really well received was when he joined, he wanted to go to the meeting that was like team having the meeting versus have a meeting where everyone would get ready to meet with the CEO. So he actually wouldn't let people do their own prepared meeting. He's like, hey, when's the stand up? I want to go to the stand up and talk to everybody at the stand up. And it still ends up with the CEO at the meeting. So it changes the nature of the meeting. But the visit, it's a visible signal that like the stand up is the more important meeting. And that's where you want to go. And so that I think helps people apply a different sort of lens to the work that's being done. I thought that was really good. Another concept with the frontline obsession speaks to like experimenting all the time, like just keep trying things versus move too quickly to what's like the playbook I'm supposed to follow. And so I think we've done tons of stuff in that regards in the last year that's been really healthy too.
Yeah, I think like it was Steve Jobs who had to like give like the final approval on ad copy or like creative. And I think Chesky is similar, like final approval goes through him.
Yeah.
Is that something that you guys have brought back as well? Or is that's more like the founder mode?
Well, I think this is where I got a little confused by founder mode because one of the early comments was like, you just shouldn't let people take your company away from you. Like you should decide everything. You can't decide everything.
Yeah.
And senior people, like they want to run things too. You're not going to get a senior person just tee up everything for you. And so that's where I got really frustrated by the way it was spilling out because that couldn't be what you meant, is that you decide everything. And so I think what I've learned is the founder should have a really clear point of view on where they are going to annoy everyone and be involved at the most minute level of detail, but also pick things where they're not. And they're going to trust other people because I don't agree that it's true that founders are better at everything than everybody, right? Like that doesn't work that way, but they do have a different level of insight into what the company is supposed to become. And so you usually see them play. This has certainly been my experience with Nirav coming back. The two biggest areas are the product and the company itself. Like the product and the culture is, I think, where the founder should like really keep their involvement heavy. I remember even Google and at Yahoo, again, 10,000 plus people, 80,000 plus people at one point. Google was famous. Like Larry Page would approve every offer. We're hiring 1,000 people a week, like nothing could be approved without his review. Marissa did the same thing at Yahoo because hiring was something he can. Now that doesn't mean every founder should pick that. That should be the thing that they pick. But I think they have to be really clear to the company, I'm going to be involved in this thing all the way to the ground. And that's just the deal. But if you try to do that for everything at scale, I think you're going to clog up the system. It's going to be too bottlenecked.
I love this conversation. I've spent 25 years in HR. The first half, I was a practitioner. So I was a consultant, then I did corporate HR. And then the back half of my career, I've been an entrepreneur, always targeting HR. And so I feel like I'm a founder just as much as I am an HR practitioner. It's a weird existence. But when you walk through the framework from the founder's mentality, the one that jumped out at me was the owner's mindset. And I don't know why. I'm sitting here trying to figure out why that's the one. And I just I get angry when I hear things like, yeah, that's the most abused one, because I've seen that also. And people are people, and they're without clarity, they're going to do what they're going to do. And I love the three kind of clarifying points on owner's mindset: cash, aversion to bureaucracy, and a bias to action. And to me, that last point is sums it all up. If we are not moving, we are dying. If we are not growing, we are dying. And we have to, and competition is always lurking around the corner. And so what are we doing? How are we thinking about the cash we're spending? How are we getting caught up in the politics, and how we're even applying owner's mindset to our OKRs? And then are we taking the critical actions? And so that, I don't know, Daniel, which one really resonates for you, but that's the one that gets me. And I'm curious how, and maybe this is a way we can segue into the last part of the conversation we want to have with you, but how does HR contribute? Because I believe HR plays a critical role in the culture, right? And what we're talking about, these ways of operating, to me, I believe have to be embedded in the culture. It has to be part of the fabric of who we are and how we come in to do our work every day. And so I'm just curious, and it doesn't have to be owner's mindset, but how does the HR team then begin to operationalize this founder's mentality?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think people leaders too often get called the custodian of the culture, like they're the decision makers of what the culture is or isn't.
Police.
Yeah, police. It's the same thing though, right? Like they're not like the regulators. I think what becomes important is when you take a value, like for us, experimentation is part of the frontline obsession. Okay, so we agree experimentation or innovation has got to be important to our success. Like everybody says this in tech, we have to innovate. The people team's got to really think about, okay, how are we going to make this a thing, like a recurring thing? Like, how do we build it into the systems employees operate within? So a common one is, well, we can pick the questions people have to answer when they get promoted. So if innovation is really a thing, why would we promote leaders without asking them about innovation? Or you could say biased action, your example, Stephen, right? You could hardwire it in to the evaluations. Leaders do control that system of performance, right? And so if you're saying it's really important, but then it's not in the performance conversation or the promotion conversation, it's actually not that important, right? Because the systems that are tied to who gets paid have to represent what is actually important. So someone's getting paid or promoted, there's things they're doing to get there that is recognized. If it doesn't match what you're saying, you've got this official system that's not real and this unofficial system that isn't. Or you can also think about the events, the awards you give out that recognize the right behaviors. This is your way of kind of scaling up the important behaviors, is really kind of recognizing and reinforcing them through what you do. And it's got to be the people leader that makes sense of this. Like a lot of people teams just kind of plug and play HR practices without thinking about the unique identity they're trying to cultivate. And so people go into these people processes and everyone does some type of review and everyone does some type of compensation. But if it doesn't reflect the vision of the founder or the leadership team, your people team's really untethered from the culture you're trying to create. So that's where I think you've got to be creative, right? Is how can you make these moments that really tell everyone or show everyone, yeah, this behavior is important to us. And that's what this thing is really about, this event or this action.
Makes me think of Stacy Ritchie from SmartCat, who we had on our panel at MPL Live Boston. She was talking about how at SmartCat, they give, I don't remember what they call the award, but it's like Innovator of the Year. That's the award. And part of the description of that award, or the way that they describe that award, isn't about what was the biggest, what was the most successful test, but what was the most innovative test, to get people comfortable with the idea of failing and learning from these big ideas that they're willing to put out there. And so that was what came to mind when you were describing that. Something that I don't think we've talked about yet, which I remember you mentioning in our prep call, was that there's also been this push to free up depth between senior leaders and the day-to-day. What did you mean by that when we talked in our last prep call?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you scale quickly, you just, particularly with senior people, they bring in this perspective, this new point of view that you're all excited about adding to the team. But when you add a lot of people with a lot of new perspective and a lot of new things you want to track, it just adds complexity to the organization. And what happens then is the most important things are mixed in with also important things that might not be the most important. It just means you're in a million meetings and you're trying to do a million things at once. And so we have really tried to simplify things as much as we can. And that's meant editing some things away. That means taking away programs, taking away, shrinking teams, shrinking the number of leaders over a period of time with the interest of like more velocity on less topics. So you hear this at like every company at scale struggles with this. I remember, again, Google of over 100,000 people, Susan Wojcicki saying like, we need more wood behind less arrows. This was a company with like literally 100,000 people. Google has plenty of freaking arrows, but you run into like your ambition grows. And so you're trying to get too much stuff out the door, and it creates this wedge where the things you know are the most important start to really go behind. So when I look at our kind of like company rhythms, and this is everything from the people stuff, like our performance reviews and promotions, to our product development process and like our shipping cadence, how we figure out what we're going to build and how we ship it. We've tried to become really crisp, like really sharp on like what are the exact conversations we're supposed to be having when, and then like let's leave it at that and then move on to the next thing when it's time for the next thing. Where I just, the companies I've been a part of its growth, and we definitely got caught a little bit this at Nextdoor, is you just start to take on more and more and more, and you feel like because you have more and more people you can do it. But the more people adds this level of complexity that actually slows. It's actually slower than less people focused on less things. I don't know if I'm speaking in generalities, but that throughput's really important.
As a founder, I know exactly what you mean. And it's like, I often say, like, we are not, there's no lack of great ideas. When Daniel and I are planning, like there's so many, and there's only two of us. There's so many things we can do with an asset like the modern people leader. And so the question is, how do we find the best one? The idea that is most compelling to the market, the idea that we are most likely to successfully implement, and how do we align these things? And it's really freaking hard just with the two of us. So I can only imagine, like at scale, hundreds of employees, thousands of employees, you want to hire the best people for every role you have at the company. And with that, they're bringing what they believe are the best ideas. And I can see how that quickly snowballs out of control. And so how long has it been now? So we're in
just over a year.
We're in the third era. Yeah. How long has it been?
Year two, era three.
Okay. Year two of era three. And so the organization, it sounds like some of the mission, vision, value stuff, there's been some realignment work around what your founder that's been brought back wants to do, what era 3 is going to look like. There's been some organizational alignment around founders' mentality. I'm sure you incorporated some other stuff. And so just as you look, what are some of the initiatives that you're most excited about as we look through now and the end of the year, if even further, if you're not on a calendar year basis? Like, what are some of the things that are on HR's plate, some of the initiatives you guys are working on, if you're able to share, that you're excited about or that you're proud of if they're already complete or in progress?
Before we add that HR caveat, we're really excited because we're doing like a full relaunch of the product this summer. So this is like the number one biggest focus of the company right now. It's this relaunch of Nextdoor.
Yeah, tell us more. Like
you'll see it. You'll see a month or two. But I say that because this is like our number one thing internally we're focused on. And
one of the moments that's always stuck with me was something that Darren Murph, the former head of remote at GitLab, said. And this is from an OG episode. He said, "We've decoupled business results from place. But the next big unlock is decoupling business results from time." He called this time independence. And to get there, teams need to completely rethink how work happens. And so when I was reading through Atlassian's new report, The State of Teams 2025, that's all I could think about. That's the quote that kept coming to mind. They surveyed 200 Fortune 1000 execs and 12,000 knowledge workers to understand what the highest performing teams are doing differently. Spoiler alert, it's not about more meetings, more tools, or forcing everyone into one way of working. It's about putting a system into place, one that helps teams align on goals, plan together, and actually use their collective knowledge so that AI can help instead of overwhelming teams. This report is completely ungated, no email walls, no forms. So if you want to take a look, just click the link in the show notes and you'll get access to the full PDF.
It's interesting. I had a conversation with my team a couple weeks ago. Q1 is always typically is a very big people team quarter. You've got headcount plans come out, compensation, all that type of stuff. And what I've found, just most companies I've worked at, is like once you get to like April, you kind of got to leave everybody alone. They're kind of people teamed out at this point. They need to you start to hear things like, hey, I need to get some real work done, which isn't meant to be an insult to what we need to doing, but we're just hammering them with trainings and conversations they got to have and templates they got to do. So April, I've always found kind of March, April for us is when we start to turn inwards and think about what we're really going to build with our portfolio stuff that we want to ship to the company. And then we usually, show up in a big way again in Q3. But I got to say, this is going to be cliche at this point, but I'm so excited about the capabilities AI is bringing to the people space. It's really unbelievable. Particularly if you're constrained for resources, the forcing function to really learn how to use these tools faster is incredible. And I'm personally using it so much right now. It's letting me kind of contribute almost as an individual contributor in a way that I would have been honestly too time consuming to really justify it before. And now the way I can iterate with Gemini or ChatGPT and kind of create real stuff to share with people, the velocity is so much faster. Where before I would have been I can't spend a week on this. I've got to get across too many things. And now it's I could totally spend a couple hours on it. And so some of the programs I've been putting together, whether it's leadership development programs, the one I really worked on last week is really trying to figure out how to put together an AI bootcamp for employees. It's incredible how good it is just by going back and forth. So I just think this is going to be an incredible unlock for people leaders the more they lean into the knowledge base that's available to them.
I want to learn more about this AI bootcamp.
Yeah, it came from an insight at actually the HR Confidential conference we were talking about before at Transform. And I was Danny Glory, who's the chief people officer at Glassdoor, said this prompt, which I immediately wrote down. He said to ChatGPT, I think he uses Claude, whatever. We're all getting to know we each have our own AI buddies. He uses Claude. And so he said, okay, Claude, I want to be an AI forward people leader 12 months from now. Put together a 12-month development plan for me right now so that a year from now, I'm at the forefront of AI as an HR leader. And he said it just spit out this whole program, podcasts, books, articles, YouTube videos he should watch, classes. And I was like, God, that's the answers to the test. Why didn't I think of this prompt? So I was really, really impressed by this. And so that kind of started me on the loop of I need to do the same thing for a bunch of employees. And so I'm trying to put this program together for a pilot group of probably 20 individual contributors to just get them going. Because I think companies are different, but I've certainly felt the whole spectrum of resistance to we're too busy. And again, it's the email I said at the beginning from the Shopify CEO. I think people are just increasingly feeling we're stuck doing things the old way. And there's this availability of efficiency and creativity and quality. It's right there. And as a leader, you've got to really push to help people make this transition because it's this real superpower. And I'm just, the pace of it getting better and better is mind blowing.
Yeah. My first reaction to what you just said is wait a minute, I don't have to sign up for one of the dozens of courses that's being advertised to me on LinkedIn. One of the AI workshops, that is awesome. And I think that's a perfect example, Bryan, of just start using it. Talk to other people in your network that you admire that are using it. This Glassdoor. Now I want to have the Glassdoor CPO on because that is so basic, so obvious, but I had never thought about that. We're way into this just because we founded a company around the time that ChatGPT was released. So it's part of who we are because of that.
Yeah.
We had Taylor Bradley on recently. I'm blanking on his title. I think it's VP of maybe talent development at Turing. And he explained to us how they've created, or him and his team have created, what they call a prompt pantry. And so he has, I think it started as a Google Doc where they all put in like their most used prompts, and then from there they'll all work together to like improve these different prompts that are taking on different tasks within the people team. And then
Genius.
once they get something far enough to where they can't improve it anymore, they then approach somebody on the engineering team and get them involved and figure out like how they can take it even further. And so it's really cool to hear how different people teams are approaching using tools like Claude or GPT or Gemini or, like you said, whatever your buddy is. And I think what you're the story you shared about how you just asked GPT or the Glassdoor CPO just asked GPT like what should my development plan be as a people leader to get better at AI. That just proves the point that Stephen made a few weeks ago when we were at Transform. We were at a dinner, and Stephen was sharing how one of our recent guests was talking about how the future of learning is scaled to one, meaning our personal bots are going to be better at teaching us than anybody else because they know the most about you. And I think that was the perfect example.
I do think people are like, the headlines is all about like replacing jobs, which I'm sure at some point is going to be a big deal. But I just think we're in this co-pilot era where people get so much horsepower out of using AI as like someone riding shotgun with them. And I just, not enough people, I think, are putting that person in the seat next to them enough. And once you start doing it, you really quickly can see what it can give you at like any level.
Oh,
And so I think right now it's going past, like I see in the Shopify note really push this. We have to get out of, hey, this was cool, into like, no, this is how I use it every day. Like the expectations are, certainly mine are going from, this isn't like, we're out of like, look at this, it's cool phase, into like, you're losing too much time and energy by not doing this. And so I think that's why you're getting a lot more assertiveness from leaders to say like, this is a must have now, not a nice to have.
yeah. I mean, my comment, someone on LinkedIn in my feed posted the article from Shopify, the Shopify CEO. And my response to that was like, to me, it's just common sense now. Like, this isn't like a news. This isn't news. If you've been using the tools, like, you know already, like, that should be a question every single employee is asking themselves, not only net new, right? Everything should be put through the lens because it is so powerful. I totally agree. Before we wrap, because we're reaching that point where we do need to turn the conversation to come to an end. You mentioned that you've been thinking about, in our prep call, that you've been thinking about people operations like a product, inspired by what Lucia shared on our show. I always want to say her name the wrong way, so I want to make sure I pronounce it the right way. And so I'm just curious, like, because we love Lucia, we saw her at Transform as well. What does this mean to you, and how do you see it coming together at Nextdoor?
Yeah, shout out to Lucia. I miss working with her. She's a great teammate, good friend. It was great hearing her on this podcast. I'm seeing first that it's almost becoming like a meme in the people space right now. Like I think that people team or culture as a product is really picking up steam. We've been talking about it here at Nextdoor since like the fall of last year. Like it's just been growing quickly as just a way of thinking about what you produce. It's not making us completely rethink everything, but it is giving us a really helpful lens into thinking about how our employees experience the stuff we're building. So I think it definitely helps kind of reorient you that your employees are users of something you're building versus people team can kind of justify like you have to do this because we're the people team. So that's been really helpful. Even today I was in a meeting and 3 different teams on the people team were asking new hires something, and they were all kind of unaware that each other were asking the same thing. And I'm like, the new hire doesn't care that they just see us as one team. So if they get 10 inbounds, it doesn't matter that one of you did 3 and one of you did 4 and the other did 3. It's like they just got 10. And so the product lens really helps you understand like what's the experience that they're going through when you put it all together. So I don't know if you guys have had Jessica Zwaan on the show. Like her book, Built for People, I think is like really, really an excellent way to just understand this concept if you're new to it. I kind of tore through that book on a flight home from the East Coast one time. But some of the ideas that like I really like were great shifts for me were really thinking about your services in terms of like product launches and like more versions. So we're like V1, V2, V3 of all sorts of stuff now. It almost gives us permission to like be done with this wave because we're going to do another one 6 months from now. It's definitely upping our velocity. And then the idea of kind of piloting in an A/B testing. I think we always piloted things, but I never really thought about A/B testing different approaches to a solution, which of course makes so much sense. And internally you have so much rope to just do kind of like whatever you want with new things. People are usually willing to try stuff. So that idea of trying multiple things the same way versus just trying to go from, hey, we tried it with one team, now let's go to the whole company. That's been really, really valuable. And then just how her framework talks about these squads of people that kind of organize around the solution you're creating. It was packed with insights, but it's definitely been a great new way for me to think about the stuff we're doing here at Nextdoor.
Well, I can't help myself but give a shameless plug. Next week, I mean, this could have been my good news story, but we're going to launch our product with Jessie Zwaan. She's going to be our co-founder for that. It's going to be called MPL Build, all focused on building
awesome.
people as a product. And I mean, if you're open to it, we would love to have you back in some capacity to either be a part of that. If we do, I'm just thinking out loud here. If we did like a live session where we're, I don't know, it could be anything from sharing like all of your top AI prompts related to people ops as a product, or it could be anything, but we're trying to get as many former guests involved as possible. So we'd love to have you back if you're interested.
Absolutely.
And so that brings us to rapid fire questions. We promised we would get you out of here no later than 15 minutes late, which still isn't asking much from you.
Cutting it close.
Yeah. So the last segment of the show is called rapid fire questions. We ask the same set of questions to every guest. And yeah, let's see how fast we can get through. So question 1, what's one piece of advice that you give to someone starting in HR today?
It's really for more than HR. It's just focus on learning. I think that's always been something I've come back to, is the velocity of learning. And when you run into this new disruptive phase, which AI is, the ability to learn is what it's like the only path through it.
I hesitated because I was about to jump into a conversation there, but I love that one. Next question. If your team gave you a superpower nickname, what would it be?
It's funny. I asked a couple of them. It didn't go so well. So, we have a lot of fun. I think I don't get too negative, with the caveat, like, unless it's meant to be funny. So I'm very self-deprecating, but I think just not getting too down is really important for anyone in the people space.
It's like Mr. Positive or something like that. Or
Mr. Positivity.
I started with Mr. Positive, but it's really about not going too negative versus making everything positive. I'm positive too, but go through these ups and downs when you try to build a company. And the tough days can be really tough. And I think a lot of people can turn to the people team, by extension, the people leader, on like, how should we feel about this? And just that it's more like about resilience, and we'll get through it. But being optimistic is also essential and part of that, but it's also just not going too far down when it's tough.
Yeah. All right. Next question. If you could steal one strategy from another company, what would it be?
I think it's tied to the last question. So I learned this from a woman who leads HR at Jasper AI. And they're currently experimenting with recording every single meeting, because they're a remote company, and using AI to harness the content in every meeting. And so, of course, it raises all these questions about discoverability from a legal perspective, and what does that mean, that people being recorded? But it's clear, like, these new benefits to having this AI co-pilot as a part of as much as possible. And I just applaud the way that they're experimenting with this. I definitely want to see the benefits before I decide you can't do it. You know what I mean? For all the reasons that are quickly obvious. Yeah. So
it would be smart to do that. And remind us to mention our coffee with Annie Dean at Atlassian in New York. And
okay, cool. But
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I've heard of this. This was the first time, but I've heard of others since I started asking, and it's clearly, there's definitely some action there. So I want to see what's up.
Last question. who do we need to have on the show next? Like if there's someone that's emerging that like Lucia, like the next gen of Lucia, like who are those people? Who should we bring on to the Modern People Leader?
Yeah, so the woman I just mentioned, her name's Alex Shapiro. She's the head of people at Jasper.ai. We actually worked together a long time ago at Google. I saw her at Transform, and I recommend her because the panels she was on, I thought were definitely some of the most insightful ones. I think she's got a ton of great perspective on modern people practices, particularly at the intersection of AI. And so I think you should have her on.
I feel like she's been on our list even. So we may have reached out to her in the past, but we need to reach back out to her because I think this is her sign.
I'm going to text her in 3 minutes.
Yeah. All right. So final tradition, one word or phrase close. We all respond with a word or phrase from the episode we want to close with. So whatever's on your mind.
50.
Hey. Steven?
I'm going to go with Stockdale Paradox because that's what Bryan reminded me with the Mr. Positive. And if you don't know, if you're a listener and you don't know what that is, DM me and I would happily talk your ear off on the topic. But I'm a big believer in that mindset.
I'm going to say frontline obsession. Steven, you asked me what resonated with me the most, and it's definitely frontline obsession. I mean, we're a small company. It's just us two. We're the two founders, but I feel like that's been a focus for us the last 6 months, and it's paid off. So
big time.
Yeah.
Big time. Well, Bryan, this was amazing. Like, please come back and join us. There's some magic happens when we have guests, and I've said this on the show before, that have clear opinions. They're willing to opine on some difficult things, and they're willing to take some curveballs from us. And so we really appreciate you and sharing your time with us. This has been fantastic.
Thanks. Listen, one thing I want to say, one of the greatest things that's come out of COVID, I really feel like, is the people domain has become much more collaborative and sharing as a community. And it's essential to have people like you who are creating the platform to share, learn from other people, learn new faces and new names. So honored and humbled you guys had me on here, and just keep doing what you're doing. It's really, really a great show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All righty, guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Modern People Leader. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to know what you think about the show, and you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.